In this first scene, Proctor buys land that belonged to Putnam. However, Putnam states that Goody Nurse's husband, who sold Proctor the land, never had any right to sell it to him. This causes tension between some of the characters just a few moments before the arrival of Reverend John Hale.
Hello, Mr. Proctor, what lumber is that you're dragging?
My lumber from my forest down by the riverside. Your grandfather had a habit of willing land that didn't belong to him, if I may say plain.
If you try and take the lumber of mine home with you, you'll have to fight to take it home.
Hey, won't win, Mr. Putnam. Let's go.
During the second scene, Reverend Hale has arrived and begins to learn about the strange things that have been happening in Salem. Specifically, Paris gives details about her daughter, Abigail, and her actions, which have been raising suspicions about her and why she's been acting out of the ordinary.
Will you look at my daughter, sir? She's tried to jump out the window waving her arms as if she was trying to fly.
She cannot bear to hear the Lord's name, Mr. Hale. That's a sure sign of witchcraft. Afloat.
Good then, what were the first warning signs of this strangeness?
Well, sir, I discovered my niece, and 10 to 12 other girls dancing in the forest last night.
Mr. Paris's slave has knowledge of conjuring, sir. I know it, sir. I sent my child. She should learn from Tituba, who murdered her sisters.
This next scene continues upon new suspicions that Giles has about his wife's book. He claims he can't pray when she reads it. Reverend Hale believes the stoppage of a prayer by a book needs to be further analyzed, but at a later time.
What book is that?
I cannot tell if it'll hurt the child, but if she is truly in the grips of the devil, we may have to rip and tear to get her free.
Mr. Hale, I've always wanted to know from a learned man what signifies the reading of a strange book.
Who would take a book?
Martha, my wife. I walked in at night when she's reading it. And now, what do I make of it?
In our last scene, Putnam and Paris begin to get information out of Abigail and Tituba with Reverend Hale present. At first, they don't hesitate to point the blame on each other, but then Tituba is given some form of immunity from Reverend Hale. Then, right as the first act is about to close, Abigail and Betty confess and give the names of those they supposedly saw with the devil.
Take courage. You must give us their names. How can you bear to see this child suffering? Look at her, Tituba. Her soul is so tender, we must protect her. Tituba, the devil is out preying on her life like a beast upon the pure flesh of a lamb. God will bless you for help.
I want to open myself. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. I dance for the devil. I saw him. I wrote in his book. I go back to Jesus. I kiss his hand. I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil.
I saw George Jacob with the devil, and I saw Goody Howe with the devil.
Glory to God, it is broken. They are free.
I saw Goody Sibber with the devil.
I saw Alice Barrows with the devil.
I saw Goody Hawkins with the devil.
I saw Goody Bibber with the devil.
I saw Goody Booth with the devil.
The second act takes place 8 days later when John Proctor returns home late from planting fields, and right when he enters the scene and shows his obvious discontent about coming home, there's definitely already a sense of separation and tension that's set there and eventually evolves between them as the act progresses. And this is also emphasized with Mary Warren being added to the whole mess, which we'll see later in the act. And during a time period and setting where patriarchy was a common norm, it was interesting for our group to display this tension without interfering with the social standards, so you'll see how we try to keep the dynamic alive while maintaining the male dominance that's supposed to be there.
What keeps you so late? It's almost dark.
I were playing far out by the forest hedge.
Oh, you're done then?
The farm is seated. Are the boys asleep?
They will be soon.
Pray now for a fair summer.
Hey,
Are you well today?
I am. It is a rabbit.
So throughout the novel, women are portrayed in many different ways, from being these good, moral, upright people to the complete opposite. And we have to keep in mind that Miller isn't a feminist, but he also doesn't condemn all women as well, which forces him to find a balance to make the story more believable to the audience. And one of the ways he does this is by making Elizabeth Proctor seem as the most faithful person, and he also idolizes her as the ideal woman in the play. You will notice that she was still obedient to her husband John, despite the thing he did behind her back, and the audience will also notice a correlation between the relationship and the role of women during the time period of the novel, by the way Elizabeth contains herself, and by the way she reacts and responds to John's bad temper.
I think you're sad again, are you?
You come so late, I thought you'd gone to Salem this afternoon.
Why? I have no business in Salem.
You did speak of going earlier this week.
Well, I thought better of it since.
Mary Warren's there today.
Why'd you let her? You heard me forbid her to go to Salem anymore.
I couldn't stop her. It is a mouse no more. I forbid her to go. And she raises up her chin like a daughter of a prince and says to me, I must go to Salem, Goody Proctor. I am an official of the court. I think you must go to Salem, John. I think so. You must tell them it's not a fraud.
Aye, it is surely.
Let you go to Cheever. He knows you well. Tell him what she said to you last week in her uncle's home. She said it had naught to do with witchcraft, did she not?
Aye, she did. I'm only wondering how I may prove what she told me, Elizabeth. If the girl's a saint now, I think it's not easy for me to prove she's not fraud. And the town gone so silly. She told it to me in a room alone. I have no proof of it.
You were alone with her?
For a moment, alone, aye.
Well then, is it not as you told me?
For a moment, I say. The others come in soon after.
Do as you wish, then.
Woman, I'll not have your suspicion anymore.
I see what I see, John.
Now that the tension is more apparent between John and Elizabeth, questions start to rise about the relationship between Abigail and John. The repercussion for not being open and honest with each other ultimately becomes the undoing of the calm, tense tone and mood prior to Elizabeth's line, I see what I see, which questions the authority and integrity of John and gets him angry. After her statement, he demands her to stop judging him, but she turns the tables on him and claims that she isn't judging him, but that he's judging himself, which makes him fear of what others think about him, loosely adding on to the already prevalent hysteria surrounding the witch trials. The characterization of Elizabeth interestingly evolves around Miller's choice of dialogue for this normally obedient character. The way she argues contrasts with the person that she was portrayed to be earlier in the act.
How do you go to Salem when I forbid it? You leave this house to get on with you.
I'm sick. My insides shudder. I made a gift for you today. I had to sit for long hours and decided to pass the time with sewing.
Why, thank you. It's a fair puppet.
We must all love each other now, Goody Proctor.
Indeed we must.
I'll get up early in the morning and clean the house, but I must go to bed now.
Mary, is it true there be 14 women arrested?
No, sir. There be 39 now.
Why is she weeping? What ails you, child?
He sentenced her. He must. But not Sarah Good. For Sarah Good confessed, you see.
Oh, Mary, surely you...
She tried to kill me many times, Goody Proctor.
Why, I never heard you mention that before.
I never knew it before. I never knew anything before. When she comes into the court, I say to myself, I must not accuse this woman, for she sleep in ditches, and so very old and poor. But then she sits there, denying and denying. And I feel misty coldness climbing up my back, and the skin of my skull begin to creep, and I feel a clamp around my neck, and I cannot breathe air. And then I hear a voice, a screaming voice, and it were my voice. And all at once I remembered everything she'd done to me.
Why? What did she do to you?
So many times, Mr. Proctor, she come to this very door, begging bread and a cup of cider, and mark this, whenever I turned her away empty, she mumbled.
Mumbled? She may mumble if she's hungry.
But what does she mumble? You must remember, Goody Proctor, last month, a Monday, I think, she walked away, and I thought my guts would burst for 2 days after. Do you remember it?
Why, I do, I think, but...
And so I told that to Judge Hawthorne, and he asks her, so, Sarah Good, says he, what curse do you mumble that girl must fall sick after turning you away? And then she replies, Why, Your Excellence, no curse at all. I only say my commandments. I hope I say my commandments, says she.
And so condemned her?
Why, they must when she condemned herself.
But the proof.
I told you the proof. It's hard proof. Hard as rock, the judges said.
All official, you.
I'll not stand whipping anymore.
Mary, promise you'll stay at home.
The devil's loose in Salem. We must find out where he's hiding.
I'll whip the devil out of you.
I saved her life today.
I am accused? Who accused me?
By law, I must not confess.
Go to bed.
So Mary Warren all of a sudden shows back up and comes with news from Salem. She feeds John and Elizabeth with more hysteria about witchcraft in general. Something to keep in mind is that even though their characters might sound convincing and may seem like they're trying to sell their lines by the way they act, they're actually being controlled by the power and force of hysteria as a whole. Since hysteria isn't made up with a bunch of lies that people intentionally make up, but it's rather a collectively agreed theory of something that no one has a great understanding of. Miller uses his dialogue to maintain the persistence that John has as a character by making him seem more concerned about himself than the rising hysteria that seems to be affecting everything around him.
It isn't her dearest hope, John, I know it. There be 1,000 names, why she call mine? She thinks to take my place, John.
She cannot think it.
John, have you ever shown her some kind of content? She cannot pass in church, but you will blush.
I may blush for my sin.
I think she sees another meaning in that blush.
And what see you? What see you, Elizabeth?
I think you be somewhat ashamed, for I am there and she's so close.
When will you know me, woman?
Then go and tell her she's a whore. Whenever she may promise, break it, John, break it.
Fine, then I'll go.
Oh, how unwillingly.
I will curse her harder than the oldest cinder in hell.